Caylee Anthony, accused of a crime so unthinkable it captivated the nation and cast a shadow over the justice system. Today we're diving into the pivotal arguments, evidence and surprising moments from this trial that still divides opinion. In this video we'll journey through the key legal arguments, pivotal evidence and surprising moments that defined one of the most divisive trials in modern history. We'll start with an overview of what happened, followed by an analysis of the prosecution and defence arguments. And finally, we'll examine a missed opportunity and explore how the political landscape may have shifted the perception of this controversial case. The Caylee Anthony story begins on July 15, 2008, when Cindy Anthony, Casey's mother, reported that her granddaughter Caylee had gone missing for over a month. She also noted a strange odour in Casey's car. This assertion was subsequently retracted by Cindy Anthony. Caylee Anthony was then interviewed by the police about the disappearance of her daughter Caylee. She provided a false account, alleging that the nanny had abducted her, and then when this claim was proved to be false, Caylee Anthony further claimed to have been too frightened to report the incident to the police. And as a result, Caylee Anthony was charged with making false statements, as well as child neglect and obstruction of justice. These charges were laid a day after Cindy Anthony, Casey's mother, had phoned the police to report Caylee missing. By October 2008, the charges escalated when Caylee Anthony was indicted on the most serious of crimes: first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter. By December of that year, a wooded area near the Anthony house, Caylee's body was discovered. Following this, Caylee Anthony went to trial on May 2011, where the prosecution and defence presented conflicting theories around Caylee's death. So stay tuned as we go through these theories and how they played out in court. Now, let's turn to the prosecution's case first. The prosecution theorised that Caylee Anthony murdered her daughter, Caylee, by using chloroform to subdue her and then suffocating her with duct tape. The prosecution's case relied heavily on internet searches. Specifically, they cited 85 instances of the search for the word chloroform on the Anthony home computer. Nevertheless, the identity of the individual who conducted these searches remains unknown, and the evidence itself came under intense scrutiny from the defence, which in the end cast doubt on the prosecution's entire case, but more on that later on. The next significant part of evidence presented by the prosecution was a hair found in Caylee Anthony's car trunk. This came about because Cindy Anthony, in her original statement to the police, reported a foul odour coming from Caylee's car, and she said it smelled like a dead body. This, of course, led investigators to forensically test the car for the presence of decomposition, and during that testing they located a hair in the trunk of Caylee Anthony's car, which they believed may have belonged to Caylee. The hair certainly took on a significant role in the trial, as it was microscopically tested and was found to be similar to the hair taken from Caylee's hairbrush. Forensic analysis found root banding near the base of the hair, which was discovered in Caylee's car, and this is a condition that only occurs after death. The prosecution argued that this evidence clearly pointed to the hair belonging to Caylee, suggesting her body had been in the trunk of Caylee's car. The prosecution's next argument focused on Caylee Anthony's behaviour. They highlighted several red flags uncovered during the investigation. One of the detectives, a key investigator, testified that Caylee's casual attitude during interviews suggested that she was more preoccupied with mundane matters rather than the grave disappearance of her daughter Caylee. He also thought that Caylee showed little to no emotion when discussing her daughter, and this he thought was unusual, as most parents in this situation would be distraught. Certainly, Caylee had made multiple false statements to the police, and while the detective found Caylee's demeanour suspicious, experts warned that behaviour alone does not prove guilt. So I do agree with that. Police are often very wary of everyone, especially those they interview, for situations like this. So I wouldn't place too much weight on the detective's claims about Casey's behaviour. Perhaps the most significant factor here was the 31-day delay in reporting Caylee missing, which was undeniably abnormal. And remember, it was Cindy Anthony, not Casey, who raised the alarm. And on this point, I think the prosecution had a strong case. What do you think? Do you think this delay in reporting Caylee's disappearance was suspicious? And this neatly brings us to the final part of the prosecution's case. What was Caylee Anthony's motive for allegedly murdering her only daughter? Here the prosecution struggled to establish a clear motive. They argued that Casey's desire for a carefree lifestyle marked by an active, party-centric life drove her to want to eliminate Caylee from the picture. Additionally, the prosecution noted the absence of intense emotional pain typically expected from a parent who had just lost a child. This, they thought, was strange. In fact, they believed that Casey's behaviour was inconsistent with that of a grieving mother. Switching now to the defence's arguments, where they argued that Casey did not kill Caylee, but her death was a tragic accident, claiming that Caylee drowned in the family swimming pool. They suggested Casey's unusual behaviour was part of a cover-up shaped by complex family dynamics and Casey's father, George Anthony, who they argued was potentially involved in the cover-up. As for the chloroform searches, the prosecution argued that Casey had searched the word chloroform 84 times until it was revealed a technical error had caused an incorrect calculation. The actual number of searches was 1, so the prosecution's case was starting to crumble at this point. And what's more, it was Cindy Anthony, not Casey, who searched the internet for the word chloroform. Cindy Anthony claimed to have accidentally searched for the wrong term while looking for information about chlorophyll, as she was concerned about her dog ingesting potentially poisonous leaves in the backyard of the family home. The defence also successfully challenged the reliability of the hair analysis. They argued that the hair root could not be definitively identified as DNA evidence and therefore could not be linked to Caylee or her death. While the prosecution claimed that the car's odour indicated decomposition, the defence strongly argued that the odour originated from discarded trash. Ultimately, these revelations severely undermined the prosecution's claim that Casey was somehow involved in her daughter's death. Turning now to Casey's unusual behaviour during the investigation, the defence argued that Casey's behaviour was the result of a dysfunctional family and alleged abuse from her father, George Anthony. And while Casey led an active social life, there was no physical evidence such as DNA to definitively connect Casey to her daughter's demise. The defence highlighted the lack of concrete evidence linking Casey to her daughter's death. The prosecution did have a key piece of evidence, and that was the delay in reporting Casey's disappearance. The defence explained the 31-day delay was because Casey was in a state of shock and distress. They argued that her behaviour had been influenced by her father, George Anthony, who had helped Casey to cover up Caylee's accidental drowning in the family pool. They maintained that she was attempting to conceal a tragic accident, not the crime of murder. And I think this typifies how the defence was able to systematically dismantle the prosecution's claims throughout the trial. And I think here the prosecution had an opportunity to counter the defence's claim. They could have contrasted Casey's behaviour with examples from other cases where individuals showed genuine shock and distress when reporting a missing person. This would have helped to contrast Casey's behaviour with typical responses in similar situations. And the prosecution could have further strengthened their case by presenting expert testimony, such as a psychologist who could have provided insights into the typical responses of someone in Casey's situation. This was one of the many missed opportunities that ultimately contributed to Caylee Anthony being acquitted of the murder charges. Now turning to motive, where the defence argued that Casey's party lifestyle was a coping mechanism to deal with her daughter's death. They presented Casey as a person who was trying to maintain a front of normalcy while dealing with immense personal turmoil. While the prosecution presented a strong emotional argument for motive, such as Caylee's desire for freedom, I think the defence put up a better argument and were able to create reasonable doubt within the minds of the jurors. As Caylee Anthony's lawyer said, she had no motive. Casey treated Caylee well. She loved that child. Well, that completes the end of the defence's arguments. Let's now turn to that crucial oversight that may have changed the outcome of this case. A missed browser search for foolproof suffocation methods. And the only person to use this browser in the Anthony household was Casey. If this had been brought to trial earlier and backed by a stronger prosecution's strategy, it could have certainly influenced or even changed the verdict. So that's where I'll end my analysis on the defence and prosecution arguments. Let's now turn to the jury and how they weighed up the evidence and arguments. One juror admitted after the trial that while they didn't like Caylee Anthony and they thought she was a terrible person, the prosecution simply did not have enough evidence to prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The juror also mentioned the prosecution lawyer's behaviour in the courtroom played a significant role in their decision-making. They described the lead prosecutor as arrogant and ambitious, noting that the defence attorney seemed more invested in the case. I believe the juror is suggesting here that the prosecutor's courtroom demeanour may have undermined the credibility and effectiveness of the prosecution's arguments. Despite all this, Caylee Anthony was acquitted of all the most serious charges, including first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter. Caylee Anthony, however, was found guilty of providing false information to the police. She was sentenced to 4 years in jail, but she received credit for time already served, so she was released shortly after the verdict. And this verdict still remains controversial to today, with many still expressing their dissatisfaction with the outcome of the case. So what's happened since the trial? Well, there has been credibility issues raised about the way the police handled this and other investigations around the same time. In fact, retired Judge Bevan Perry, who presided over the original trial, has even suggested that these issues might have influenced the result of this case. Now, before I finish up, I want to address a final question, and that is, could Caylee Anthony be retried for her daughter's murder if new evidence emerged? And the answer is clearly no. This is because the law of double jeopardy prohibits a retrial. Caylee Anthony can never go on trial again for her daughter's murder. You just simply cannot be tried twice for the same crime. The political landscape in the US is changing fast, especially when it comes to women's rights, and that could have a big impact on how unresolved cases like this are viewed in the future. I want to leave you with this question. If the charges against Donald Trump evaporate and the rule of law is progressively undermined, could the public's intense dissatisfaction with this case create enough political pressure for politicians to revisit it and bring it back into a legal spotlight? Let's wrap this up. I think this case raises an important question between the fragility between law and democracy. Caylee Anthony's death remains a mystery. We still don't know how she died or even if she was murdered, and if she was, by whom. The prime suspect, of course, is her mother, Caylee Anthony. So, the question here, was justice truly served for Caylee? Personally, I don't think so. What do you think? Did Caylee Anthony slip through the cracks of our justice system, or was she wrongly accused? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into cases like this. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.